All right. Hello, everybody. It's Coach Matt O'Brien, and welcome to Magic Pill Mondays Live, episode 21. I cannot believe it's been 21 episodes already. And the goal of Magic Pill Mondays is to bring you curated content and timely takeaways so you can live a longer, healthier, and happier life. That's the objective. And that's the objective that I hope to serve you. And I use the same objective to serve myself, because if we don't take care of ourselves, then ultimately, we could be impacting those around us, either by not being around to help them, or worse, I would say, them taking care of us because of some debilitating condition. But now, before we get started today we're talking about women's hormones, how they change over age, as we age, and also I'm going to do a little bit of debunking about HRT and get into the pros and the cons and give you some revealing information. The tide has turned. There's a lot of misinformation in the early 2000s that I want to share with you, particularly with the results of a meta-analysis in 2017. And it really is changing the game and the opinions on HRT. But many people, including many physicians and practitioners, are still living in the past a little bit because they may be unaware of this new updated information. But before we get started, I want to give a quick plug for our Mom Strong program. And if you're joining me live, please put in the comments your name, and so I can see you. I'm using a software called StreamYard, and depending on your platform that you're commenting on, I may not be able to see your name, but I can see your comments. So if you put your name and any comment or question you want, I would love to say hi as we move forward through this. And I see Michelle is on. What is up? I love you, Michelle. Hope you're having a great night. Thank you for diving in. And this information will be super relevant for you and all women. So bear with me as we dive through it. But I'm just giving a quick plug for our Mom Strong program. We've had this brainchild for a long time, and it's finally coming to fruition from the efforts of my wife, our assistant manager, Gabby, and lots of planning and preparation. But it will be here in its pre-launch phase next week. But basically, it's a program on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We're going to provide what we're going to call Kid Club, which is supervised. We'll call it adult supervision for children up to the age of 7, so that moms can go work out stress-free and eliminate that potential excuse of, oh, what about my kid? So that's the objective of the program. And I've always believed, or I don't believe, I know it, that strong moms create stronger families. So our goal with this program is to help either moms to be in late stage pregnancy get ready for a smooth delivery and a healthy recovery, and postpartum moms to recover faster after they get the 6-week clearance. And then moms of any age or status that want to get back in the game, or maybe they've never been in the exercise game. So our Mom Strong programs will be kind of catered more to a beginner level, but we will tailor it to the fitness level of the participants. And then also the Kid Club hours will cover our normal TriFit class at 9:30, which is a little bit more advanced. Sky's the limit on that one. And the Mom Strong class will be 10:45 on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So basically, the way we're pricing this, for basically about $14 class, less than an hour of babysitting. You get babysitting and personal training, supervised group style workouts. So I don't think there's a better programming method in Tampa Bay, and I'm super biased, obviously, because I do the programming, but there's a lot of science that goes into it. So Sarah, I see you're joining us. What is up? Thank you for joining. We're diving into women's hormones, and I was just giving a quick plug for Mom Strong. Before I dive into women's hormones, now this is part 3 of a 3-part series. So if you haven't seen part one, which is basically a hormonal overview that pertains to everybody. Part two was geared towards men and male TRT. We addressed that. Today, we're diving into women, and we will cover HRT specifically and the pros and cons that should be considerations if that's something you want to know. But in that process, I want to dig back to what was called the Women's Health Initiative. This is a massive study in the 90s, involving 50,000 plus women. And the headlines that came out in the early 2000s, like 2001, 2, was basically summarizing, paraphrasing. The shock value headlines was HRT in women causes breast cancer. And that was kind of the big takeaway. And there's a lot of physicians and practitioners that still think this way. And it's not necessarily wrong, but it's not the whole picture, the whole story. So let me give you the updated version. In 2017, there was a large meta-analysis of the women's health initiatives, and they reviewed the data and really scrubbed it properly, as well as the study methodologies. And now the new takeaways, kind of summarizing what I did for the original study. But the new one is basically, oh shit, we screwed that up. And that is not a headline you're ever going to read, but that's what it should say, because the realities are they scared a lot of people away from HRT that could have been beneficial. And even today, like I said, there's doctors and practitioners that are really shying away or cautious for HRT when it can really help a lot of people. So what was the real evidence? Basically, the Women's Health Initiative relevant to HRT, there was 3 groups. You always have a control group in a clinical trial. So they got nothing, and they were monitored for their health outcomes. Then there was an estrogen only treatment group. And then there was an estrogen plus progesterone treatment group. So 3 groups analyzed over time. And here's something that's important to understand. The hormone replacements used at that time were very antiquated compared to what's available today. Literally, the estrogen was equine based from horse pee, and the progesterone was a synthetic version that's no longer on the market. And basically, those headlines I said earlier, HRT causes breast cancer in women, it was what the actual headline was HRT increases the risk of breast cancer by 27% in women. And the facts, when they really dug in, was this, and you can make your own intelligent observation, is that in the estrogen plus progesterone, synthetic progesterone group, the relative risk went up 27%. So that sounds pretty significant. But let's look at what we call absolute risk. So absolute risk is what I always like to find in a study if I can find it and if I have the time. But more often than not, I'll let somebody more intelligent than me that is more familiar with statistics and p-values and statistical analysis do the work and the heavy lifting for me. And when they give me the cherry on top information I really want to know, then it sticks in my old ass brain and I can remember it. And what I remember from this analysis in 2017 was that the absolute risk was for the control group, meaning the non-treatment group, basically trying to represent your normal risk. It was 3 cases per 1,000 during the study period experienced or got some type of breast cancer. So 3 out of 1,000. In the progesterone plus estrogen group, the cases were 4 per 1,000. 3 per 1,000 versus 4 per 1,000. So if you really do the absolute risk, it's in the 0.00 something range. I don't want to do the math because it's been a long time, but a very small risk increase when you do absolute. But the headlines are always going to say relative 3 versus 1,000 versus 4. And that's where they came up with the 27%, 4 versus 3. So that's just something important to understand. And the estrogen only group actually had a reduced risk reduction. But that's not what you really need to know. You need to know that just as an important consideration. The other reality is that breast cancer is now being caught early and it's very treatable. And I'm not saying at all that breast cancer is anything anybody wants to experience. But when you compare it to the more significant and real risk that's not as glamorous, does not involve pink ribbons and breast cancer walks and big community events and a lot of fundraising, is a much more significant and real risk to women, which is bone mineral density. And that, my friends, is maybe you're more familiar with it being called osteoporosis or osteopenia. And the reality is, women now, because post-menopause, estrogen goes dramatically down over time to 0. And estrogen actually is very cardioprotective, muscle protective, visceral fat protective, and bone mineral density protective. So the reality is, in the risk factors of longevity and quality of life, is that estrogen will actually significantly reduce the likelihood of bone fractures by maintaining bone mineral density. And why is that important? It doesn't seem that significant or fearful, but here's the scary truth. And if you're watching live, I want you to put holy shit in the comments when I reveal this statistic. This is scary stuff. And pardon my French, but I want to make some impact here. And hopefully this information will alter the course of somebody's thinking. But here's the truth. When somebody over the age of 65, male or female, experiences a fracture of the hip or the femur, so hip, femur, over the age of 65, fracture, 35% of those individuals will be dead within 1 year. Let me say that again. 35% of the people over the age of 65 who experience a hip or femur fracture because their bone mineral density is crap, it's like flypaper, will die within a year. That is insanely scary and more significant a risk factor than the cons of anything that HRT might cause. So why is that important, relevant to HRT? I'm going to dig in deeper, but the reality is estrogen, besides all the other benefits, the most significant is that it's going to help maintain muscle mass and preserve bone mineral density. And that is much scarier and much more realistically a consideration for health and longevity than the headline of increased breast cancer risk that was from synthetic progesterone, only in that group. And that progesterone is no longer even on the market. And bioidentical progesterone, which is only necessary if you have a uterus, if you've had a hysterectomy and you want to do HRT, you don't have to do the progesterone. But more recent data supports that there's no increase or elevated risk in HRT. Now, there's no long-term studies, so that's always going to be the fallout and the caveat that any health practitioner is going to caution anybody, is that there's no long-term data. But there is data on bone fractures, and there is data that estrogen preserves bone mineral density. So we can use our deductive reasoning, our brains, to deduce the reality that if we increase our bone density through exercise and strength training and potentially hormone replacement therapy, particularly estrogen and testosterone and progesterone, if you have your female equipment still intact. And there's a lot of women that have had hysterectomies for a variety of reasons, but it's just a significant and important consideration. And that's not to even get into some more cardioprotective, mood elevating, and visceral fat protective benefits of estrogen. So visceral fat's the fat that's around the organs. And if you have observed, women in their later 50s and 60s will develop more of the apple shaped, beer belly ish shape of males as they lose the estrogen. That's because they lose that visceral fat protection that estrogen typically will do in females. So that's just a little precursor, because it's probably the most important takeaway of today's episode of Magic Pill Monday, is that you need to be aware. And with the preponderance of evidence and the internet and Google and all these social media experts, it's impossible to stay on top of all the information and know who to trust. And I'm not asking you to trust me, but I try to present in a way that's somewhat hopefully efficient and effective some useful information. That's why I call it the curated content and timely takeaways of Magic Pill Mondays. And I really feel this is significant. And not to mention the quality of life that goes along with it, sleep. During menopause, estrogen therapy or hormone replacement therapy can dramatically or completely reduce the hot flashes, the night sweats, and some of the irritability that comes with menopause. So there's women out there needlessly suffering because of old beliefs and old information. So I'm just trying to educate this audience that has taken the time to pay attention, which I completely appreciate, respect, and value, with some information that maybe you can talk or have a conversation with your doctor that might make sense. And I'm going to talk about some questions you can ask your doctor to see maybe if they're the right fit or the wrong fit when it comes to considering hormone replacement therapy. Because if they're still living in the Stone Ages, and there's reasons for that, and I don't blame them, it's just maybe they're really busy, or maybe they're just not the type of personality that is going to have the insane desire like I do, or insatiable curiosity to constantly educate myself on what the latest school of thinking, what the latest information is demonstrating. But it's just unfortunate and fortunate in a way that we have to be our own self-help advocates. Self-health advocates. That's hard to say. You want to say, we have to be our self-help advocates too, but self-health advocates. And so this is ways that I help you, hopefully, and my clients kind of navigate through these confusing waters and how to deal with our doctors in the process. So that's just how I wanted to kick this off, is really to tackle that information and hopefully give you some takeaways. And thank you. I see a Facebook user that said, holy shit. And I asked earlier when we first started, if you're joining me, just put your name in the comments, because I actually do see Sarah. I do see Michelle, but there's somebody else that I don't recognize your name, because I'm using a software called StreamYard, and it's streaming on multiple platforms. So on some, I don't get to see your name. So Diane, welcome. Hopefully that was a wake-up call or some information you might be able to use. So the other thing, we want to dive into, we're going to get into women's hormones now. And like I said in the beginning, this is part 3 of a 3-part series on hormones. Part 1 was really a good overview of the critical hormones, the primary hormones that affect everybody. Insulin. What's up, Glenda? I see you too. Thank you for putting your name in, and hopefully you get some value. If you missed the beginning, definitely go back and watch that. But for women particularly, it's going to be some valuable information to improve not just quality of life, but my book, The Magic Pill, the subtitle is your prescription for a longer, healthier, happier life. And I did a lot of research writing that book, but since then a lot of new evidence has come out, particularly supporting the arguments I made back in 2011 about exercise being more significant of a risk reducer than smoking, nutrition, blood pressure, and a lot of other things. And science is now agreeing, and the medical profession is as well. But also protein forward diet and some other cool things. But now there's a changing tide relevant to women's hormone replacement therapy. So if you're a woman and you're either approaching menopause, you're in menopause, or you're post-menopause, this is really valuable information because of the life-extending benefits that estrogen can lend when it not just affects bone mineral density, it actually does it because of the effect on skeletal muscle mass. So our metabolism doesn't slow down. It's just the fact that we lose muscle as we age. And estrogen, along with testosterone in women, are going to help optimize your ability to gain or maintain muscle tissue as well as bone mineral density. And those are usually directly correlated, meaning if your muscle goes up, your bone density goes up because those muscles pull on those bones and create the stimulus to form strong, healthy bones. So that was kind of I kind of cut to the chase there to give you some really important actionable information. And now we'll kind of go into the basic information about women specific hormones that aren't the primary ones I already talked about: cortisol, estrogen, or insulin, and thyroid hormones. So if you're interested in that, watch episode I don't even know, but it was part 1 of this 3-part series. I think it was episode 17, but it's in TrYumph Nation. It's on my Facebook page. It's on my YouTube channel. And if you're on YouTube, our YouTube channel is at TrYumph Nation TV. And there's a playlist specifically for Magic Pill Monday by episode, so you can quickly search that way. But let's dig in real quick to hormones specific to women. And what we're talking about is estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And yes, there's more than that, but those are the 3 primary sex hormones that affect women. And this is a crazy fact, ladies, that did you know by molecule you have more testosterone than you do estrogen? And you may say, oh, Matt, you're full of shit. I see my estrogen report and I see my testosterone, and my estrogen number is really high or much higher than my testosterone. That's because they're in different units. You got to look at the units of measurement, whether it's picograms or deciliters or milligrams or micrograms per milliliter. But when you do it in an absolute equated way, women have more testosterone than estrogen. And testosterone, and I say that because testosterone is important as we age for quality of life, muscle development, and bone mineral density, just like estrogen. So a hormone replacement practitioner is going to manage those hormones. And we'll get into that a little more specifically, but just know, unfortunately, women, you're much more complicated because you're beautiful creatures that God designed in a very intelligent way with a lot more moving parts and switches and levers than us, kind of simple guys. We have like testosterone on or off, brain on or off, where women have a lot more control buttons. So the point of that is, like a hormone replacement practitioner, it's going to take more time typically to get women dialed in than men, 6 months to 12 months. So you need to be patient through the process, patient with the practitioner. You just want to make sure they're experienced, have some knowledge of what they're doing, and you're not their guinea pig. So at the end, I'm going to give you some questions to ask if this is something you want to consider. But let's go into estrogen first. Those 3 hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, are critical, and they affect your reproductive health, your bone density, we talked about, your cardiovascular function, mood. This is a biggie, as women know. When you're experiencing hormonal cycles, and their mates also know that mood can be dramatically affected by hormone levels. But other than that, estrogen specifically is responsible for your female reproductive organs and sexual characteristics. regulates your menstrual cycle, bone density, lipid metabolism. That's that visceral fat, how you metabolize fat. It also affects mood, cognitive function, and skin health. So definitely important. And when you go through menopause and perimenopause, as those levels decline, you're going to get symptoms like hot flashes and vaginal dryness, and that risk of osteoporosis start to increase as estrogen levels fall. Progesterone is primarily involved with the preparation of the uterus for pregnancy, and that's that natural period cycle where you get the sloughing and your menstrual cycle, and that's the discarded tissue coming out. And that's why if you're doing hormone replacement post-menopause or post a hysterectomy, progesterone would not be necessary if you don't have the uterus. But if you do have one, it's part of the hormone replacement therapy cocktail because it will prevent the slightly increased risk of uterine cancer. So that's just important consideration. That's why you want to work with an experienced practitioner. But progesterone also affects mood, sleep, and fluid balance. So if that's going down, these things are being affected. And then finally, testosterone, normally considered the male hormone, male sex hormone characteristics, but in women, it plays a crucial role in overall health, contributes to sexual desire, bone density, muscle mass, and overall energy levels. So as you age, testosterone levels naturally go down, especially after menopause, and this can contribute to reduced libido, fatigue, and loss of muscle mass. And when you lose muscle, you lose bone density as well. So as you age and go through menopause, these levels are going to decline, typically, slowly over 3 to 7 years. And menopause can start very early in some women, and it can start very late in others, even into the 50s. And there's been women in their 60s that have conceived and bore children. So it's very individual. So that's important to understand, just in general. So 3 important hormones. The takeaway is they're going to do a lot of cool things. Post-menopause, they go down. Rate will be determined based on individual to individual. But once they're gone, quality of life and bone mineral density, muscle mass, metabolism, all those are affected significantly. So that's where we get back into full circle, back to hormone replacement therapy that I promised I'd circle back. And then ultimately, I'm going to end up with the questions you can ask your doctor if this is something you want to consider. I see Kim just checking the notes. If you're joining me now, if you can put your name in the comments just so I can see that you're here and acknowledge you. I see Kim is on board. Welcome. And hopefully you're getting some valuable information from this episode, which I think is critically important. The biggest takeaway is potentially understanding the risk reward profile of hormone replacement therapy. And I'm not here to advocate it or strongly, recommend you don't consider. I'm just presenting the information so you can make your own intelligent decisions. Just also cautioning you that many doctors are likely going to just kind of have a gut reflex or a reflex reaction that is based on antiquated and outdated information that I went over in the beginning of this episode. And that's from the Women's Health Initiative. And there was a lot of essentially false information that came out, and a lot of practitioners are still using that and saying, hormone replacement therapy causes cancer, when really it doesn't, and it will improve the quality of life and decrease the risk of fractures are much more likely to kill you, especially if you're a woman over the age of 65. So let's talk about kind of the pros of specifically HRT, hormone replacement therapy in women. I don't know. In women, they call it HRT, and men, they call it TRT. But they should be HRT men, HRT women. They're essentially the same thing. But in women, like an HRT practitioner is going to manage estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And they're going to use a variety. There's a variety of administration methods, creams, injections, pellets, and oral, molecules that you would ingest or drink with water and swallow. So there's lots of considerations of how you administer the hormone replacement, but the pros significantly are symptom relief if you're definitely having menopausal symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, mood swings. So hormone replacement during menopause can largely mitigate those negative symptoms. This is the big one: improve bone health. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from today's episode is estrogen replacement therapy, potentially along with testosterone, can help prevent osteoporosis, increase metabolism, and decrease your risk of fractures, which we went over. If you're over the age of 65 and you have a fracture of your hip or femur, 35% likelihood that you will die within a year. So that scares the crap out of me, and I'm not even a woman over the age of 65. But I know a lot of women over 65 are approaching that age, and it's like, holy crap. That's really scary. My mother-in-law, my mom, they're all in that age category. So I think that's probably the most significant consideration. And then when you factor in estrogen and testosterone, and I went over many times, and I would continue to go over the benefits of exercise, but maintaining our strength and muscle mass and cardiorespiratory fitness, bar none, are the most significant things you can do to increase your health span or decrease the likelihood of dying early. So, and estrogen and testosterone are going to help, promote the best benefits if you're actually going through the effort of doing the exercise. So you're just going to get more bang for your exercise buck. So the other big one, number 3, is the cardiovascular benefits. And this is a big takeaway. A lot of women over postmenopause, like, why am I getting, a gut now? I've never had one in my entire life. Or why am I storing fat in my belly? And that's because estrogen is cardioprotective because it lowers or protects women against visceral fat adiposity, storage of that fat in the abdomen around the organs. And that type of fat is the most highly correlated to all-cause mortality. So that's another huge benefit or consideration of HRT for women. So cons, the negatives are there's a lot of misinformation. So you're going to get confusing opinions. You're going to get potentially friends and family members that might accuse you of being stupid or taking chances if you actually did HRT, because a lot of people are going off on that old information that HRT causes breast cancer in women. There's no long-term studies. This is valid, but, when you kind of use causal relationships, estrogen protects your bone mineral density. More bone mineral density, less likely to break your hip. That's kind of a common sense thing, but they're not sure, long-term use relative to blood clots, breast cancer, stroke. Those are scary sounding words, but just doesn't really stack up when you consider all the benefits. That's just grasping for straws. Individual variability, I already mentioned, that's why you want to work with an experienced doctor so that they can navigate all the moving parts, do your blood work, and make course corrections if necessary to get you optimized, dialed in, feeling your best, and seeing those improvements both in muscle mass as well as bone mineral density and potentially visceral fat if they're tracking that. So individual variability, everybody's going to respond differently. So getting the right dosage for you specifically is, a consideration. And then time-limited use. Like I said, there's no long-term clinical data for people that want to use it. So people don't really know, should I recommend you do it short-term, long-term? My thought process, which is only worth a grain of salt, is, things that are going to protect your bone and muscle that we know for a fact are going to increase lifespan and quality of life as we age. To me, it makes sense that long-term use would equate to longer health span and quality of life. So jury's still out, but that's just my common sense conclusion. So if you decided that you wanted to potentially work with a doctor or pursue at least asking questions about HRT, these are some questions I came up with on how to vet or do your due diligence with maybe the doctor you're already working with or one you want to consider. So I see Colleen is now on. So welcome, Colleen. Thank you for putting your name in there. And so thank you for everybody for joining. Hopefully you got some useful information out of this, and we can do a little bit of a part in getting the word out and changing some of the misinformation that is out there. But if you decide to work with a doctor, same question I would ask if you decided to work with a personal trainer is, how much experience do you have prescribing and managing hormone replacement therapy in other patients, particularly your population group, which if you're a woman would be female. And if you're postmenopause, I would specifically say postmenopausal women. If I was perimenopausal, I would say perimenopausal women. If I was premenopause, I would say premenopause, or maybe any specific considerations that are pertinent to you specifically, see if they have any experience. And if they do, then that's going to be more relevant. You can ask them, how was your experience? Hopefully it was good. And then a good question is asking them, this would be my first question, what is your opinion on hormone replacement therapy in women in general, short-term and long-term use? And if they come immediately back with that reflex reaction that HRT causes cancer or raises your risk for breast cancer, that would quickly tell you they're probably still in the stone ages of the current information. And again, that's not to fault them or criticize them. It's just they're not up to speed. They haven't gone to the latest medical conference, where a lot of times they get that information if they're actually attending the conference and not out playing golf. But that question will kind of reveal to you where they're at on the spectrum of HRT. But if they give you a better answer, like, well, there was some information, and now in 2017, the information has changed, and now we know XYZ, then they're a little bit more up to speed. And then I would ask them that second question, which was my first, how much experience do you have with HRT? And then I would ask them, what administration methods do you offer, or do you work with, or do you recommend? And with hormone replacement therapy, there's a variety. It could be pellets, and the good of the pellets is it's basically a hormone that's put into a pellet or tablet, compressed, and then they make a very small incision. They don't have to even suture it. They usually just put Dermabond or a butterfly bandage on, and it heals by itself. And they just insert it under the skin or in and around the buttocks of your body. And the downside is it's a guessing game. So they're going to take their best guess on how many or what size pellets and what hormonal combinations to use. Hopefully do some follow-up blood work in 8 weeks, 6 weeks to 8 weeks to 12 weeks, somewhere in that window, depending on your doctor. And then based on those results, they can say, in your personal experience, your quality, how you feel, they can say, okay, that was good. It was off the mark, high or low, and then they can adjust the next time. So that's the downside, is that the administration you can only change it every 4 months or so. So you can't pivot very quickly like some of the others. But the upside is it's set it and forget it for 4 months. So your life goes on, and you don't have to really think about anything on a daily basis. So another method is creams. And these are compounded creams with the hormone in some kind of transdermal cream or patch, and usually applied fairly frequently. Creams are typically daily. Patches can be daily or every 3 days, depending on. Patches are kind of going away, and the compounded creams are more prevalent. So that's something you have to remember, once a day or even twice a day. And the third method could be some kind of oral pill or tablet. And then you have to remember to take that as well. And sometimes it's going to be a combination. It might be estrogen transdermal cream and a progesterone oral tablet, and you're doing them both. So, just something that you have to manage and be pretty vigilant about. So that would be a consideration. And a question that I would ask the practitioner or the doctor, what methods do you use versus recommend? You want a variety there would be probably a good thing. And then finally would be cost and insurance considerations. Most of the time, insurance is not going to cover hormone replacement therapy just because there's no long-term clinical data. And that's what insurance pays on for risk reduction or other study evidence. So this might, in most cases, going to be an out-of-pocket expense. And it's typically going to be in the neighborhood of 80 on the low to maybe 250 to 300 per month, 80 per month to 250 to 300, but averaging in the 100s per month for out-of-pocket costs to do some type of hormonal replacement therapy. So that is food for thought on both hormone replacement therapy and hormones in women. If you're still on, let me know if that was value. Give me a takeaway that maybe you received. If you have any other questions, I'm wrapping up, but I will be happy to stay on for a few minutes. If you have any specific questions that I can at least attempt to answer, or if I don't know the answer, I'll be happy to do some research and get back to you. So if you're still on, say hi and any questions or any takeaways you got. And if you find this might be valuable to somebody else, you can either direct them to our YouTube channel at TrYumph Nation TV. We spell TrYumph with a Y, TrYumph, because the Y in TrYumph is you. I believe we are largely in control of our triumphs in life, our victories, our mindset. And Michelle said the bone density issue was her big wow. And I would say absolutely yes. And the doctor I primarily feel that I spent a lot of time, because he's a statistician by training before he went to medical school, and he actually did it professionally for McKinsey as an analyst. But Peter Attia, who's now essentially one of the most respected health and longevity practicing physicians in the country, meaning he actually sees patients and he presents and tracks information like no other doctor I know with himself and his patients, from CGM, blood sugar monitoring, to VO2 max testing that he makes his patients do, to all the blood lipid monitoring, and advocates exercise and all these nutrition strategies that just make sense. But his opinion, he did a whole podcast. And if you're interested and you want a really deep, long, dive, you can watch it on 1.5 speed like I do. But this was he had the head study designer, whatever her title is, for the Women's Health Initiative on his podcast, and was politely grilling her on the study results and some of the information. But his big point that he framed to her was, even if estrogen slightly raised the risk of breast cancer from 3 cases per 1,000 to 4, which we know was the synthetic progesterone, and it was not the estrogen, which actually would decrease the risk. But even if it did, that small of level compared to the significant crisis that we have of bone mineral density in women over the age of 50, and we know the significance of getting a bone fracture in the hip or femur, he goes, full stop. That was his words. Full stop. I'm recommending my patients at least consider the hormone replacement therapy for that significant risk reduction compared to the slight, if anything, risk change of, considering breast cancer risk. So hopefully that kind of gives y'all some takeaways. I'm going to wrap this up and just say thank you for everybody for tuning in. Magic Pill Mondays is basically my attempt to bring curated content and timely takeaways to help people live a longer, healthier, happier life. And hopefully you got some of those, and you can share the wealth either on this channel by commenting or on the YouTube channel, which is at TrYumph Nation TV. So thank you for tuning in this week. And next week, I'm doing a deep dive into blood pressure, how to monitor it, how to measure it properly. If you go to the doctor or you go donate blood like I do, and they put the cuff on and it comes up with this really high reading, and they're like, wow, your blood pressure is really high, you should talk to your doctor. Sometimes that could be, in a lot of cases, that could be a false positive. So I'm going to teach you how to appropriately put the cuff on, size the cuff so you can advise the person doing it on you, where to put your arm at heart level, how to monitor and measure blood pressure, but also what we can do about it if it is high, some of the considerations there, some of the medications that you may consider, because blood pressure is a significant risk for all-cause mortality. So that's going to be next week's topic on Magic Pill Mondays Live. So if you're interested, let me know in the comments. I'll see if I can at least let you know that I'm going live. And at some point in the future, we're going to have some kind of notification broadcast for those tuning in or want to tune in live, so you are aware of it. So y'all have an amazing week. It is Monday. Set some goals for this week and accomplish some things for your health. And most importantly, stay strong, my friends. And I hope to see you next week on Magic Pill Mondays Live. I'm Coach Matt O'Brien. Hopefully, y'all have an amazing week. Cheers for now. We'll see you next time.